All right, well, welcome to another PSL demo day. Today, we're really excited to have Matt Jensen, who is the founder and director of the Open Source Policy Center at AEI. Matt's been a real inspiration for the PSL community, and many of the models in the library have been incubated at the OSPC at AEI. We're excited to have Matt today to talk about how to use multiple PSL models on the Compute Studio platform. Matt, please go ahead.
Thanks, Jason. I hope this presentation, well, I know this presentation will build on quite a few of the topics that we have seen in earlier demo days. So I'd suggest everyone, if you run into something new in this demo day, jump back in time. You can go to the YouTube channel, jump back in time, go through the earlier demo days, and you'll get caught up quite quickly. And there's also a lot of good material there for learning about how to conduct policy simulation with the policy simulation library. Today in particular, let me go ahead and share my screen. We're going to jump off into the TaxBrain, into the TaxBrain Compute Studio app, compute.studio/PSL models/tax-brain. Jason, if you can't see that, please shout and let me know.
That's great.
Great. So what I've done here, and the first step in this demo today is going to be teeing up a reform in TaxBrain. If you scroll down through what we'll be doing today, you can see that I've already done that in this TaxBrain run. Just something really simple here. I went into the graphical user interface, again, compute.studio, PSL models, TaxBrain, and I changed the Social Security payroll tax rate from 12.4%. This is the combined employer and employee payroll tax rate. I changed it from 12.4 to 10%. And it's a minor change. And if you recall from the earlier demo days, TaxBrain, what it does is it allows me to look at the budgetary effects of this policy reform. If you switch to output, you can see, we can click in, we can see, okay, we cut the payroll tax rate, payroll tax liabilities go down, that all makes sense. Everything seems to be working fine. But today, we're actually interested in something else. We're interested in what happens if we take this reform over to the Tax Cruncher application. And you recall that we went through Tax Cruncher in one of the earlier demo days as well. In Tax Cruncher, it allows us to see how the reform will impact individuals. And you can design what a tax unit looks like, how many kids it has, how much income they have, and then you can plug in this policy reform over in Tax Cruncher and see how's the household that I designed, how's that tax unit going to be affected. Well, obviously what we could do, and what might be simple, is I could just go up to the URL, I could type in, go over to Tax Cruncher. We can even show what that looks like here. We can hop over to Tax Cruncher, and I could then go ahead and, like a schmuck, go down here with my mouse and cursor and do the exact same thing that we just did and change this rate, wherever it is, 10%. And that's one way to do this. But that would be a huge pain if there's more than one policy parameter, if you wanted to send this policy reform to more than one other model. So what I'm going to do today is show you how to make this bridge using the Compute Studio API. So step one, we created a TaxBrain simulation. Let's just go ahead and use this one. You can find all of the information here by going to this URL here. It just takes you to this simulation. And now what we're going to do is jump over to the terminal, and I'm going to show you how to run this same reform in Tax Cruncher without going to the GUI, without typing stuff in by hand, just by using the Compute Studio API to port this reform over and run the reform in Tax Cruncher. With that, let's jump over to my terminal. Okay, Does everyone see my terminal? Shout if you don't. Great. So first step here is we're going to install CS Kit. CS Kit for Compute Studio Kit, short for Compute Studio Kit, is both a tool that will help us with authentication, and it will also serve as the API client for talking to TaxCruncher and TaxBrain. And in this case, we want to talk to both TaxBrain and TaxCruncher. We want to learn from our API what was that TaxBrain reform that we just ran, and then we want to talk to TaxCruncher and tell TaxCruncher to run the same reform. So I already have this, but you can check to see if you do or not. Pip. If you don't, you can install CS Kit. Pip install CS Kit. It's going to tell me I have it. Okay, great. The next step is also one that I've done, and I'm not going to do again here, but I'll just show you how to do it. We're going to actually go and get a API key from CS. And we can do that with this command here, CS Kit token, username, put in your CS, your Compute Studio username, and then password, put in your password. I'm not going to type mine because it'll show up as clear text. But you do that, hit enter, and you'll get your API token. Then what you want to do next is you want to actually save your API token in a file in your root directory called CS API token. So this is where you want to save it. This is the file name that you want. You want it to be here. I'm again not doing that because I didn't just get my token. But let's just say that you've done that. I have done it already. I have my token saved. So next we just need to fire up Python and access this CS API client. Python, here we are, we're in Python. You can of course do this from a Jupyter notebook, from a Python script, from anywhere. I'd recommend not doing it from the terminal, but just to keep the fewest possible requirements for this demo, I'm going to go ahead and do it from the terminal. You don't need Jupyter notebook. You don't need a Python script, which I'll show you, but I'd recommend that you use one anyways.
And Matt, just to clarify, that step you just went through with getting and then saving your token, somebody only needs to do that one time ever.
That's right.
On each run. Okay. Excellent.
Well, you need to do it one time ever to get Compute Studio set up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you won't have to do it again unless you move to a new machine.
Okay.
Or there might be a API expiration. I'm not sure about that, in which case you would need to do it again.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. So this is actually, it's really, really quite easy, right? Just to get this API machinery set up, all you have to do is authenticate, grab your API token and save it, and then you're ready to roll. So now we have CS Kit installed. I'm going to go ahead and import it here. Import CS Kit. Oh, there we go. That's imported. We actually don't need to import anything else, which is nice. We're going to do the rest with just Python and CS Kit imported. If you don't have Python installed on your machine, I recommend using the Anaconda distribution, which you can get from anaconda.org. And of course, there are many other ways to install Python on your machine as well. Google search will help. So we have CS Kit. Now we're just going to go ahead and get the CS TaxBrain client up and running. So TaxBrain client, here we're going to use that CS Kit. And we want it to be the TaxBrain. So what we're doing here is we're specifying which app we want to get up and running and who the owner of that app is so that Compute Studio can find it. In this case, we want the PSL models version of the TaxBrain app. It could be that someone else has created a TaxBrain app under a different username, so it's important to specify both here. Oops, we don't have CS kits. We only have CS kit, right? So let's go back. There you go. So now we have this TaxBrain client up and running. Now we want to go and use that TaxBrain client to grab the adjustment, the reform, from the simulation that we just ran. Then let's go ahead and save those in a variable called TaxBrain params. So these are the inputs from that TaxBrain client. We're going to specify which simulation run we want. It uses model underscore PK here. It's really what you're telling it is the simulation running. This is saying model primary key, but that's fine. We can just follow the syntax. And we'll grab in particular, the adjustment from those inputs, because that's what we want. So assuming I typed everything right, I didn't this time. Jason, do you see it?
I think of the square bracket at the end.
Oh, thank you. You're right.
And then just to kind of be clear, that number you have 49779, that was that unique URL of your TaxBrain run, right? So
That's
you can read
exactly
that
right.
number. Okay.
So that's my TaxBrain run. If you go to the URL that I showed you earlier in the demo, that's that run. And that run is also helpful because it has all of the syntax in the simulation notes. And so if you want to run through the syntax, going to compute.studio / PSL models / tax -brain / 49779 will show you all of the syntax. Okay, so that's working. And I can actually show you that real quick. Let's go ahead and take a look. Hey, we got it. We FICA, Social Security tax rate value went to 10% in 2021. So now that we have the TaxBrain reform, we just want to send it over to TaxCruncher. We're going to follow a similar path here, where the first thing we do is set up the TaxCruncher client. I'll go ahead and copy and paste this time because you've seen this before. So we've got the TaxCrunch client. Again, we're going to specify we want the PSL models of TaxCruncher, and we're going to specify that we want TaxCruncher. We've got that up and running now, and we're going to we're going to actually create a simulation now, create a TaxCruncher simulation, which is cool that you can do this from the API. We'll have our response is TaxCrunch client create. That makes sense. And we're going to specify the adjustment, and the adjustment is the policy from the TaxBrain params. I think I did that right. And now we're actually creating a simulation. So now we have a new simulation actually, and let's go ahead and rename this, make it nice and tidy, and then I'll show it to you. So we're going to update the simulation, and we're going to specify the simulation that we want to update. It is, well, it's the one that we just created. And what should we call it? Let's call it Demo Day 7. You guys remember there are 6 earlier demo days that you can go back and watch if you're interested. So here we've got, oops, it's Demo Day, not Demo Day. Demo Day 7. Let's go ahead. Oh, so I got a message from Hank this morning saying that he had updated this to use update instead of update sim, but it seems like that hasn't been pushed yet. So we're going to use this update sim. If you saw what I just did up here, TaxCrunch client.update didn't work. And so instead I use TaxCrunch.client.update sim. I think when you do this in the future, you're going to want to use the first thing. You're going to want to use .update. I just don't have the latest version loaded. In here, we can actually see we created a simulation. It's TaxCruncher number 719. And so let's switch back to the browser, and I can show you that this actually worked, I hope. We'll see. So to switch back to the browser, here we go. Okay, so we're back on the browser, and we're going to go to TaxCruncher, and then 719 is the one we just created with the API. Look at that. The title is Demo Day 7. I like to see that. The inputs, if you go down, ooh, look at that. We see that the new Social Security payroll tax rate is 10% instead of 12.4%. That's just what we wanted. We created the simulation with no manual typing required other than in my terminal. If I needed to do this for a whole lot of simulations, I could. I could do it in batch mode. I could do it with really complicated simulations. I could go the other direction from TaxCruncher back to TaxBrain. As a general matter, well, I could go through and I could pull all of the simulations that I've ever created, and I could look to see which parameters I use the most. I could pull everyone's public simulation. I could see which parameters other people are using the most. I could do all sorts of fun things now using this API because I have the power to inspect and to update and to create and to update these simulations from my terminal. And that is the CS API. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm also happy to end early if we get an opportunity to end early.
Matt, I have a question here. So on TaxCruncher, you have this tax information, so you can look at different tax filers based on income or other demographic information. Is that something you can change here in the GUI interface after you've kind of created this run?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you notice, I created this run, and TaxBrain and TaxCruncher, they both share the policy parameters, but they don't both share this tax information. What TaxCruncher does, I mentioned earlier, is allow us to look at a specific tax unit and how they're influenced by their policy. So far, I haven't told this simulation anything about the tax unit I want to look at now. I just have the policy filled in. So if I want to get any sort of interesting results, other than, I suppose it's interesting to know what happens to someone with zero income. But if I want to get interesting results for a different type of household, then I could go through here. I could update, let's say, the base wage and income, and then I could run this simulation again and see what it looks like. I could also, if I had wanted to, I could have updated that using the CS API, so they would be ready for me when I got here in my browser.
Okay, excellent. And then to get a sense of what you have to input in that CS API, is that something you can see anywhere on this kind of on the web-based version? Does it give you any tips on how to, say, format that tax information that would need to be input?
I don't think the CS API currently gives you that information in the documentation. Let me go ahead, and I'm going to switch back to the TaxBrain run. So this is everyone's notes, where you can go here and look through what we just did. I'm going to add a couple of other notes that I hope are useful. The first is, here's a link to the API guide. I just added that. Here's a link to an example using the Python client. And here's a general overview of the Python client, the Python API. There's not extensive documentation about how to interact with each model specifically yet. And so for that, I think you'll want to get in touch with either the model owner, or you can get in touch with Compute Studio, and then Compute Studio will probably put you in touch with the model owner.
All right, thanks,
I have a
Matt.
question.
Yeah. Oh.
This is Rick. Are most of the other models just going to interact in a similar way, though, through the API? I mean, it's going to be, we can use this as a template for using the other models.
You can use this as a template for the other models when there is alignment between the way the models interact with the underlying model tax calculator. And so in this case, TaxBrain and TaxCruncher both interact with one underlying model the same way. I tried to do this with cost of capital calculator, and I think that there needs to be maybe, I think, a minor changes, but possibly something more significant in cost of capital calculator, say, for this to be able to work there. I have not tried it yet with, I'm just thinking of other models that rely on the same tax calculator base. I've not tried this yet with OGUSA. And then I can say with certainty that it's not going to work with any model on Compute Studio that doesn't use tax calculator as a backbone. And so, for example, it doesn't make sense to think about doing this with matchups, which goes and looks at baseball players. And I think one of the things that this has highlighted for me that's interesting is that the models and the models that deploy in Compute Studio can make life convenient for users by thinking about how not just the GUI looks, but also about how the API works, and being able to make it so that their models are easy to interact with via API is something useful for model developers to consider when you're thinking about or deploying on Compute Studio, or if you already have a model deployed on Compute Studio.
Yeah, I see a lot of use with your demonstration, Matt, with kind of thinking about current discussions about, say, the kind of Biden plan to expand child tax credit versus the Romney plan. And a lot of discussion I've seen highlighted in the media and on Twitter this weekend was kind of with respect to different hypothetical households. And it would be really nice to kind of get the aggregate impact on revenue and so on from TaxBrain, and then you can kind of port this over to TaxCruncher and look at those hypothetical households really easily. So this is really useful. All right, Matt, thank you so much for this demo.
Thanks everyone for listening.
All right, take care. We'll see you in 2 weeks.